And I remember when I was 15, I was living at the time in the community that you just talked about, where I had several fights a week to get home from school. It wasn't chaotic to me. It was my norm. I didn't know any other experience than that. I wasn't in a gang, but in order to not get in the gang, I had to fight the gang members to stay out. And I remember a teacher asking me, Lisa, you're such a bright girl. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember that was the first time I thought about it. And I said, well, first, I want to be alive. I dare to say I've had more questions than answers in my life cycle. So I love this.
That is a life well lived. Well, look, one of the first things that I was thinking about, reviewing your backstory, and for those of you who are new to my collaborations with Lisa, we've done a couple documentaries together, a few books, we've done quite a few projects. So we've had a lot of conversations. And during the pandemic, we actually, on my other podcast, had a really good conversation about racial healing and another project Lisa was working on. So we've had a lot of conversations. So I actually really look forward to these conversations where we can delve and go into some things that we've just really never had the time to speak about. And Lisa, one of the things I was thinking about today is actually at lunch with a friend before this. And we were talking about the fact that no matter how hard you try, you will wound your children, which is an interesting concept because like my parents are amazingly loving people, but they were immigrants and they were fighting hard for
Yeah.
financial stability and other things when I was growing up. So I have some wounds from that of like scarcity
Yeah.
mentality and fight. And so no matter what we try, our children and by nature, I think the people around us will pick up on the things that are affecting us the most. And when we look at our past, we can always, there's a, ultimately we hope there's a choice. I think there is a choice with how you choose to deal with your past, but certain things, obviously I was never emotionally abused, never physically abused, never sexually abused. So I don't know that I can speak to those things. I would hope with some amount of healing, everyone gets a choice with how they process that, but I can't say that honestly because I never dealt with some of it. But looking at your past, you had a pretty hard scrabble upbringing, dodging gang fights to get to school and other things like that. At what point, or again, not to get too plain with it, but at what point did you start wondering, is there more? At what point did you start wondering, like, am I going to have to put up with this the rest of my life? Or is there something I can do to change it? Like in your youth, where did you start seeing that maybe this wasn't the normal you wanted?
Well, I remember thank you for that question. Thank you for this conversation. I think it's necessary. I think that some of our greatest journeys of awareness and awakening begins with the question. And I remember when I was 15, I was living at the time in the community that you just talked about, where I had several fights a week to get home from school. It wasn't chaotic to me. It was my norm. I didn't know any other experience than that. I wasn't in a gang, but in order to not get in the gang, I had to fight the gang members to stay out. And I remember a teacher asking me, Lisa, you're such a bright girl. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember that was the first time I thought about it. And I said, well, first, I want to be alive. I said, and if I should get the blessing to making it to 21, I'd love for you to ask me that question again. So for me, it was a little different. I needed to, as a teen, as a young adult, or as a teen, actually, my desire was to get out of what felt like flight or flight, what felt like scarcity, lack, and watch your back, what felt like urgency living, what felt like I didn't have it in my house though. I want you to know I had a great mom and a great dad. It was environment. Like my mom and dad never argued. I didn't see it. We always had food on our table. We were the mom, dad, brother, and sister that watched television together. We were very normal in our home, and our community just was the one that we can afford to live in. And so with it came all of this survival mechanism. And so I first asked myself, can I get to my adulthood? And I then asked myself, will I get there without having a child, which led me to never interact with young boys until I graduated high school because I was so afraid of being tethered. Um, will my brother make it out? I was so consumed with survival that thriving and who will I become didn't come to me until I turned about 20, 22. And then I began to go, oh, I made it. And you open this up with what damage, the damage we've done to our kids. Oh my God. I appreciate that. I'm sure you'll get to it, so I don't want to jump ahead of the gun. But when I first realized that what I had was a male child, I was more nervous than having a daughter, because my environment that I grew up in is even more brutal to young boys. And so I I am clear I did some trauma to my child. We're trying to save him from the environment, right? We don't do this, then we don't do that. And I started with his name, Jelani. I knew that I had an African American male child born in South Central Los Angeles, and I needed his name to mean something. So I named him Jelani. I looked up all the names and the meanings. I went to a Swahili name book so that I can find a name with meaning. And Jelani means he is mighty. And so I wanted to give him a name that immediately took away the opportunity to be something other than like the name just made it hard. And then his middle name is Malik, which means king. And so my poor child, Lord have mercy, his mama did it in for him. My poor child, I would put him in African garb. Now, mind you, I'm very much from LA, had never been to Africa, but I would put him in African garb with the kufi hat that kind of mimicked a crown. And every year when he signed his pictures, he would say, because I said it to him so much, my name is Jelani Malik Nichols, and I am mighty king.
That's
So anyway.
awesome. That's great. Well, it's interesting that you talk about that because there's a story you tell quite often that about you wanting to quit swimming, and your grandma wouldn't let you. And
Yeah.
it's a great story, but we've told it a couple times before. But in order to get to my next point, I need you to tell everybody what your grandma told you because that's a big deal, and
Yeah.
I think that plays into my response to that other
Yeah.
answer you have too.
Yeah. But it wasn't just what she said, Nick, it was how she said it. It's like she kind of looked at me like, you want to quit? You want to quit? Like, quit? Quit is not even in your blood. Like, what? It literally was like quitting is not, it's not in your blood. Winners never quit and quitters never win. And you're a winner. Get to it. And she said it in such a way that I felt like I had missed the memo. And she was like, you gave yourself options that winners don't have. Winners don't quit. Figure it out. And
You did. And well, and one thing I remember her telling you too is like, you come from a long line of ancestors who made it over here and did not quit to get you to where you're at in life, which I find is really interesting as you're talking about Jelani and as we
she
all
gave
have these.
painful, she gave painful details. Like she
Okay.
made me, she was like, you had a long line of ancestors and your great, great, great ancestors, they came over on a ship and many people died, but yours didn't. And then your great, great grandparents, they picked cotton 12, 14 hours a day. And some people died of sunstrokes, but yours didn't. With blistered fingers and blistered toes, they survived. Like she gave, sorry to cut you off, but she gave
No.
painful, like riveting details of who my grandparents and my great grandparents were and what they survived.
Well, she gave weight to it, right? She gave gravitas to it for the fancy big words. But the thing that I think is so fascinating, and this is an interesting concept too, is that most of us in some way, shape, or form are trying to live out the version of the story that is our ancestry, is our heritage. We identify it with a way that's like, no, this is what we do. Either we're entrepreneurs or we're creative people but there's also like a shadow side of that too. And it's like, because we're addicts and we're quitters and we're alcoholics and I've seen so many people on the success side of this as well as on the failure side of this. Let me just stop and tell everybody, we all have these things. Don't feel weird. Everybody's got all these things in your family, all these things in your lineage. You choose to identify with the ones you like, and sometimes it gets in your head the ones you don't. But there's a
Yeah.
really interesting choice that we have. At some point, we choose which side of our story, which side of our heritage we want to identify with. Which side of it do we want to prolong? Which side do we want to advance? And which side do we want to leave in the dust? And I think that that's also a traumatic thing for people, because as you're growing up and you're 5 years old to 10 years old and 15 years old and you're in college and you're trying to find yourself, you have all these stories in your head of what you're supposed to be and what you don't want to be. But I don't know, in your world, Lisa, and maybe in your story, how did you start triangulating these things so you could figure out, all right, I want to be the best of this. And I know a big part of your story was you didn't want to be with an African-American man who was in jail, which is what happened to you, the father of your son. Like, at what point do you stop running from things and start running towards things? And how do you determine what are those things going to be?
That's a really great question. Um, and just for record, I didn't want to be with African American man in jail. I don't want to be with a white man in jail. I don't want to be with a Latin man in jail. I don't want to be with a man in jail. I
Okay.
didn't want to be with a man in jail. I didn't want to be tethered to the. I don't want to be tethered to the darkness that my community seemed to just was so tethered to. It's like before I ever grew up, I was handcuffed to the legal system through something, whether through its fairness or its unfairness or through people's poor choices. I was just tethered. And for by the grace of God, my brother didn't go that route. For by the grace of God, my father didn't go that route. I didn't have any men in my family that went that route, but everyone outside of my family did. So I made a decision actually pretty early on that I couldn't be, I felt this pressed. I remember looking at the Brady Bunch when I was little. And while I didn't know anyone who looked like the Brady Bunch kids, I didn't know anyone that wasn't African American. I didn't even know anyone I didn't know any brown. I just knew African American people. I was very in a bubble. And I knew I wanted to be like the Brady Bunch, though. I said, I don't know those people, but what they represented was they solved their problems at the end of the day, and there was peace. I didn't need the two-story house. I didn't need all the siblings. I liked the peace. I was attracted to the peace. And I remember this at like 12 and 13, I was attracted to the Brady Bunch because of the peace. And I remember when my friends started interacting with the boys, we'll call it that. And I
So
remember
having
taking,
relations.
yeah, relations. And I remember we were all in a club. We all were in a club. We put a mark on our hand every day. I'm probably giving you way TMI. We would put a mark on our hand every day. And this mark represented that we were all still in the Virgins Club. And I went away to my dad's house one summer and I came back. No one had the mark. I was I was the only one with the mark. So then they created a new club and kicked me out of the club. And I could only get in the club if I had the new mark and with everything that came with it. And I remember I had to make a decision to release all of my best friends for what I believed in. And I said, I don't want to be tethered to this chaos. I don't want to be tethered to anyone here. I kid you not, Nick. I don't want to be tethered to what it can create. I don't want to be tethered. There's something out there. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, but I knew something in my soul. And if you're listening to me and you feel that calling in your soul, that call is real. You are not crazy. You're not going out your mind. If no one else in your life, in your community, in your family, if no one else understands the call, it's because they didn't get the call you did. And I wasn't sure what the call was, but I do know that the call had my name on it. And I do know that I couldn't live in any limitation of being tethered to somebody in this community. And not that the brilliance come out of the community. I came out of the community. But I didn't want to, I was too young. I'm like, I don't want to make adult decisions right now that can change the trajectory of my life. And lo and behold, I have three beautiful friends that I grew up with. I haven't seen them. I haven't spent any much time with them in the last 40 years, but they were my three best friends. They were the ones who had the marker in their hands. And dare I just say, our lives look drastically, drastically different. And I love and adore them. And I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I understood why I allowed myself to be the only one person in the same club. I was the president, I was the vice president, and I was all the members because, and so I made that decision early on. And then I saw it again in my early 20s when I could see myself not fitting in circles. Like, you have to understand that when you're a unicorn, you don't fit more places than you fit. And I think what happens is we want to fit in everywhere so much that we take our unicorn horn, and we've always been a unicorn. Nick, you were a freaking unicorn when you were 6. Like, we were unicorns. But because we don't feel comfortable not fitting, we unscrew it and we put our unicorn horn in our back pocket. And so I went for years being a unicorn, trying to fake like I was a horse. And I made a decision in my 20s. I'd rather be a unicorn and alone again. And so I have no idea if I answered your question, but it jarred up that story.
No, it's great. What reminds me, it's like there's that. First of all, there's this terrible period of life for most people called middle school, or some call it whatever. But 6th to 8th grade, I'm convinced whatever version you want. I'm convinced Satan lives in the 7th grade and he doesn't move, and he affects the 6th graders and 8th graders. But it's funny,
Listen,
like as you.
I have a bonus daughter right now in middle school, brother. I understand.
You get it. And so it's really interesting to me that as I look at my life, of course, and the lives of those around me, it seems like everybody gets to the point in middle school, and it seems about middle school is a time you get give or take a year, where at that point in your life, you just will do just about anything to just not get noticed, like to be a fly on the wall. You want the parents to pull around the back of the school, not the front. You don't want anyone calling your name out over the intercom. You don't want anyone noticing you're a little taller than everybody else, a little shorter than everybody else, a little more muscular, even positive traits. It's like
Yeah.
anything that sticks out from the norm is weird.
Yeah.
Yet we have all learned, I know you learned this too, that whatever that thing is that you're trying to hide at that point in your life, and some of us are still trying to hide it, by the way, but the moment you realize that that is what God gave you, that is the most unique thing you have, is where sometimes people start to find it in high school or college, but that's literally your greatest asset in the world. Yet we try to hide it in these scenarios where we're just not sure how the rest of the world's going to deal with it. And let's be honest, middle school, they're just going to be mean because that's what they do. That's what middle schoolers do. They're just mean. What's really interesting to me is that you, along your journey, and again, you've talked about a lot where you were told by a college professor to get a desk job, do not be a public speaker. You were told by, I believe, a high school teacher, you really probably should never write it whenever you don't have to, never write again. Yet you've turned speaking and writing into the biggest pieces of your career. You had a constitution, even from young, where you didn't maybe want to get into a situation where you're going to have a baby early and you're going to have to deal with it in high school or college. Where do you think these ideas, I mean, was it ultimately you had other dreams that were bigger than the moment, or was it you just saw, I don't know what this is, I just don't want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want, was it elimination first, or was there a dream?
So I'll go back to your previous question to tie into this. Um, I made some decisions, and I dodged the bullet of having a child with someone in my teens who ended up being, inside the prison system. And then that bullet of experience hit me. It hit me when I was 28. I had a child with someone who I met professionally in corporate, and they did a white collar crime and ended up in prison. And I truly believe that I put so much energy on being afraid of that I drew it to me. And so there's a place to explore, whether it's now or in another conversation, that what you say is one thing, but what you're thinking about is another. And I believe what you're thinking about has a lot more weight than what you're actually saying. And so I have been tethered to a man in prison. And notice my language. I have been tethered. My son turns 30 years old at the time of this recording. And I have been tethered to this man for 30 years. And he's a beautiful soul. And I understand completely why I was attracted to him. I understand completely why he brought joy and happiness into my life up until the very day he went to prison. And he also unearthed some of my biggest shadows, his choice and his position. And so to go back to your next question, I just wanted to full circle that so that if you're listening, you don't think, oh, she got out and nothing happened. And, no, something happened. And oh, by the way, when my son was in his middle school years was when he was the most angry at his father for being in prison. And it was the time when I realized I couldn't control or influence all of his happiness. It was the first time mommy couldn't fix it. And the anger he had, the hurt he had, and the sadness I had because I couldn't fix it. And so to your and I don't want to go everywhere because this is such a rich place to go. I want to make sure I stay right on path with this question. So to be clear, you want me to explain to you.
Yeah. Well, did you have a vision? Did you have a vision for your future, or were you at first just locking out all the things you didn't want?
Yes, that's what triggered it. I am comfortable to say my initial run was I was trying to outrun government's assistance again. I was trying to outrun being on the county again. I was trying to outrun the food stamps I required. I was trying to outrun having to ever get pat down going into a prison system to visit my son's father again. I was trying to outrun ever needing to get in the line to get free turkey and free cheese and free stuffing for Thanksgiving again. So my initial run was ever so to outrun the pain of my previous choices. And when my son was 3, I was engaged to be married at the time, and my fiance was emotionally abusive. And the emotional abuse turned to physical abuse. And while I was able to get out of that relationship with what some would call minimal wounds, they felt really major to me. I did come out with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the first time I stepped into personal development, Nick, I stepped in because I was diagnosed by my doctor. I'll never forget her, 1997, Dr. Bray. And she said, Lisa, you have Lisa, you are clinically depressed and you have post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. And I said, what does clinically depressed mean? Because it was so far from me. And she said, in your language, you're very, 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 very sad. You're so sad that I need to prescribe you Prozac. And it hit me, boom, I knew what Prozac was. My clients had it. I was helping my clients get off of it. And so it was that moment when I knew I needed rescuing. And it was that moment when I had to stop running from my past and I had to run toward the me I knew I could be. And that's what steeped me into the work. That's what had me jump in the work every day. But it was putting on my own oxygen mask. I wasn't in the work every day so I can show the world how great life can be. I was in this work every day so that I wouldn't be this same hot mess when my son turns 5, because I was a hot mess when he was 3. And I didn't want to be that same person. I wanted to touch my better best. I wanted to see who I could become. And then I discovered it and I literally said, wow, if this helped me, and I'm pretty hard-headed, what will it do for other people? And that's when I became.
This is a hypothesis. I've never said this before, never heard this before, but it's when you were saying that, it made me think. I wonder if this is true, that you can never outrun those things. You can only outgrow them, because I think you can't run fast enough. You have to gain a skill set to realize what will move you out of the direction of the train, right?
I love that. First of all, that's delicious. Um, and I always say, everywhere you go, there you are. Everywhere you go, there you are. So I love the concept. You can't outrun but you can outgrow the you've always known yourself to be. And I feel like we're a constant state of becoming. And and it was so beautiful when I got that like 3 years ago. I was like, oh, I'm a constant state of becoming. And if I stop becoming, then I just am who I was.
Then you're
Just
becoming dying when you stop
yeah,
becoming.
you're becoming. I always say you're the banana. If you stop ripening, then you're gonna just do the banana, right? And so, yeah, absolutely.
Man, so many places to go with that. But so that's a really interesting concept for people who are watching this. Certainly, you've had. I mean, I was reading. You've had like, I've had one Nick Nanton day in Las Vegas when they gave me my star. You've had like 800 Lisa Nichols days. So we'll talk about that later. But at what point do you? Because I always have this question. I think people think there's a point where you think you've made it. There's a point where you think you've made it, and I have yet to find that point. And I've just found the fact that the only comfort I have is that I will never make it, and that then you realize there's a different journey you have to grow on.
Yeah,
And so I would love your perspective, because that's what it seems
yeah,
like to me.
yeah. I've made it. Yeah, no. So when I was 19, I was at college, and I want to say my first year of college, but then that would make you believe I had more years in college. So it was my first and last year in college. My journey was a little different than others. I got kicked out because I couldn't afford to stay, and so um, I I remember being in college, and my professor knew that I was going through a lot. And they wrote "Black bitch go home" on my dorm room door. They put cat feces in front of my door. They poured a bucket of water over my head because I was vocal on things that didn't seem fair culturally. And I just would shine a light on them, not in an aggressive way, just go, hey, hold on, let's be fair. And just wasn't something that people were used to have carefrontation. So she saw that I was struggling as an African American student, and she had this woman come to our college, and her name happened to be Angela Davis. And Angela Davis, if you don't know, is a huge icon in the African American movement for equal rights. And I remember I was so angry, and Angela Davis said to me, I know you want to be aggressive now. I said, words aren't working. It's time to get to be aggressive. She goes, but what did you want to do before? I said, I wanted to just show people that we can live across culture lines. And she said, sweetheart, she said, if you change the way you believe and you go to aggression, then my fight would have been in vain. She said, it's your job to progress us. And it's your job to always protect the progress. And that day, Nick, something I could never, ever approach a cultural discord in the way that anyone has done it in our past, or else I'm not protecting the progress. I'm digressing. And that put a charge on me. And I was 19 at the time. And I'm saying all that to say that she's a PhD professor at, I think, UC Berkeley. And I keep saying, when I've done enough in the world, I'm going to go back and meet her. Right? So, right here I am. I got a day named after me in Vegas and in Texas and in California. And I'm like, when I do something amazing, I'm gonna go back, and and I don't discredit the things that I've already done, but I don't think I've arrived. And I'm a servant leader, and there's more to become in me than who I've been. I don't get caught up in reading my bio because I'm so busy orchestrating and designing my future. That my job is to look for the next paragraph that I'm supposed to write and to recognize that no one else can hold my pen. And if I spend my energy looking at what I've done, then I might rob myself of what I could do and who I could become. And so I think the most awkward time that I have when someone's introducing me or I'm at somewhere is listening to the bio, because I don't want the bio to distract me. And I don't want it to make me let up off the gas of the assignment on my life. Every single one of us have a unique assignment on our lives. And if you don't do you, you will never be done. And I want to get to the end of my days, honestly, and I want to look back like at that light. And I want to say, I shine my light brightly. I gave my light every ounce of wattage that I could. And I gave it all, and I'm exhausted now. Now I can rest in peace. I want to write a life story that I want to read. And I want to write a life story that's worth someone else reading. And that's not to be popular. And that's not to be the best. I don't ever measure myself as the best, because that can leave you really feeling either over-grandized
Yeah,
or underdeveloped or something. There's never a
ideal.
winner.
Yep.
There's never a winner.
Yeah, you
So
never get to the ideal, whatever that
yeah,
is. Just
yeah. And so I agree with you, brother. Like I don't even know what a rival looks like. And I don't discount who I am. But I don't want to think that I've done enough to sit down on the calling on my life.
well, and that's what I want everyone to hear who's listening or watching, that um, there are moments in your life where you reach a new mountaintop or a new peak, and it's fun for a few minutes or for a day, or you win an Emmy one night, and the next day you realize, oh, I still got to go to work, and no one's just throwing cash at me. Okay, I go back to work, I guess,
Yeah.
and usually with a worse hangover because it was a fun night. But
And and then the next day you walk past 10 people who have no idea you won an Emmy.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Right? Eat your humble pie.
precisely.
Eat your humble pie.
And so, yeah, as part of this is all of us are on a journey, and obviously the whole purpose of the journey is growing and, different parts of your life. So I don't want anyone to feel discouraged, and I want you to hear that we all feel we're the same as you. We're just on a different journey. No matter what you could look at what the accolades are, they're just different. And so don't get discouraged by that. The other thing I'm going to encourage you to not cheat that professor out of the time with you that she deserves after pouring into you that many years ago. So make sure you spend the
I
time and go
know.
see
Isn't
her.
that wild? Isn't that wild that I keep going, maybe now, maybe I've done it now. Maybe she'll be, and what, mind you, she'll never remember me because she only talked to a gazillion people. She was traveling the world speaking, and she doesn't have to remember me. I remember what she poured into me.
Well, and how few, and you've had it happen to you, and I've had it happen probably many less times. But when someone from your past comes and says, "You know what? You probably don't remember me, but you did this for me, and it changed trajectory," it's always a nice feeling. So I'm,
It's a
I'm,
nice
I'm,
bit.
I'm gonna remind you later. Put a little string around your
I
finger.
appreciate
Now,
that. I appreciate that. I appreciate
now
that.
the other thing you mentioned too that I think is really interesting is about you can behave a certain way, but if you keep thinking about it, you're essentially, now we're getting into what I would love to have a conversation about, the real law of attraction, because obviously there is a law of attraction. You got very well known. Probably your first big break was The Secret. Sort of catapulted you to a whole new level of success. But I think people really misunderstand also what the law of attraction is. Like, the law of attraction is not, let me sit at my desk and do nothing and think about having millions of dollars. It's just going to come to me. However,
I'm gonna go
the
check my
way,
mailbox. I'm gonna do nothing but sit here and concentrate on my mailbox, and I'm gonna go check my mailbox, and there'll be a check in.
yeah, that's not it. But it very much does align with what you naturally just said, that if your brain keeps looking for it, it will find it whether you want it or not. And
Yeah.
so tell me what, I mean, feel free to recount any you'd like from sort of the meteoric rise of The Secret, which you almost weren't in, I remember. And what should we really know about the law of attraction that has been so
Yeah.
perverted over the years?
Yeah. Yeah. The law of attraction is not about thinking without action. Joan Baez says that action is the antidote for your despair. and Lisa Nichols might add, action is also the prescription for your success. How is it that the same verb, it is the thing that brings you out of darkness and destruction and sadness, and that's the same verb that brings you into light and receiving and abundance? Because action is powerful. And so the law of attraction talks about what you think about, you bring about. Where you put your most energy on is what you draw to you. And while I believe that's absolutely true, like, you are manifesting your thoughts. You are shaping your life with the conversation you're having in your head, not the one you have on social media, not the one you write in your reports, not the one that you say on stage, but the conversation that's happening in your head. If you wake up, anything you say when you wake up is true about you. I'm amazing today. You happen to be right. Oh my God, today sucks. It's horrible. Oh my God, you're right. And so the law of attraction for me has been mind your thoughts, because your thoughts are shaping your future. They're shaping your reality. But there's this piece in there that it's critical for you to understand. And that is, your thoughts plus your action unequivocally equals your future. That if you want to accelerate anything, add action to it. If your thoughts were the gas, then action is the turbo boost. It's the turbo boost. If your thoughts were the seeds that's going to plant a new harvest, then your action is the water and the sun and the tilling of the soil. And so being mindful about that, I'm blown away how many people say, oh my God, Lisa, I want your life. First of all, you got to accept the whole thing. But hey, Lisa, I want your life. Okay, great. Here are the top 3 things I want to invite you to do over the next 12 months. Oh my God, that's too hard. Okay, let's reshape. You want my life without the action. That'll never happen. The difference between me and most of the people that are looking at the life I have saying they want it, but they don't have it. It's not that I'm smarter than them. I know brilliant people. I have brilliant students. I have brilliant colleagues. The difference is, for the most part, there are some extenuating circumstances, but for the most part, the difference is, Nick, I'm always in more action than them. When they say, oh my God, Lisa, how is it that you were on 37 stages this year? I can't get anyone to call me. I said, you're assuming I got it because I waited on the call. And so how much action are you willing to be in on your own behalf? That's the first part. And the second part is, what you think about you is true. So mind what you think about you. What you think about your relationship is true. What you think about your possibilities are true. Mind what you're thinking about. Now, when I say it's true, it may not be the truth, but it's your truth. And I always say, sometimes you got to make a distinction between the truth and your truth. Because if you believe something long enough, it becomes your truth. Doesn't matter if it's not the truth. It becomes your truth. Case in point, don't judge me, but I met my now husband 13 years ago. And when I met him, gorgeous, 6'9", athletic, newscaster, I made the decision that he was a playboy. He did nothing to make me think that. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. So I also made the decision he wouldn't be interested in an exclusive relationship with me. He's Mr. Fit. I'm not. And so for 8 years, this man texted me and said hi once a month, every month. And for 8 years, I discounted the hi. It couldn't be true. And then over a period of time, it became really my truth that he's a playboy. It can't be the truth. So much so that when I would see his text, I would like, what's the playboy want? No more playboy than the night that we met. And finally, I woke up to the fact that it was my story and my truth, not the truth. And I finally called him back 8 years later. And fast forward, he's my beautiful, wonderful husband today. But I made something my truth that wasn't the truth. And so being very mindful of what you attract to yourself. And I often say, you can't attract a castle dream believing you deserve a dog pound reality. So you can't search for the castle experience in the dog pound and think you'll get a prince or think you'll get a queen or think you'll get a world-class experience. You got to raise your bar of where you're even expecting. And I've had to do that 100 times over. And the energy, and I believe the universe, whatever your divine calls it, God, Allah, Muhammad, whatever it is for you, I believe it to be so, and I believe it to be true. Wherever you raise your vibration to, I just believe the universe matches that vibration. So you can't want something better than what you believe. And
You
that's
know,
where most people go off. They want
that's
something better.
Amen. A friend of mine said, "Don't let people treat you like the free salsa. You are guacamole. You are the upgrade." So this is funny when you said whatever you the story you tell yourself becomes your truth. It's
Mm-hmm.
funny. A friend of mine was telling me recently he was a backup college football player, so big school, Division I, tough to play. He's like, I just I got in a couple games like that we were just crushing or whatever. And he said a guy told me back then that don't worry, in 20 years from now everyone's an All-American. And he goes, I went back recently, and now he's been out of college 20, 25 years. And he said, I'm sitting there with the starting center. And if football, he was a quarterback, so he would take the snap from the center. And the center is telling his friends, oh, man, Bob's had his hand so far up my butt so many times. And Bob's like, I took like 3 snaps ever in a game from this guy, but now I guess we're all Americans now. Like that's just the way it works now. And so it
Yeah.
was funny because I feel like there's so many places in life when you go back, and thank God there's not social media or videotapes of some of the stories we all tell about our childhood, because they would look very different than what we've remembered. The other thing I think is interesting is that you talk about the way you have chosen to process certain things. And I think it's a massive skill that I wonder if people who like the gift of perspective, I often wonder if the struggles you were given in your formative years didn't make you better at changing your perspective than some others, because your perspective could be, man, this is a really crappy neighborhood where there's gangs outside, or your perspective could be different. Oh, this is a place, I have a home I can come to that I feel safe, and while I've got to dodge some gangs, get some fights, I can go to school. I don't know, like I think the imagination creates perspective, and I wonder if the more trauma you have, if it doesn't wreck you, if it can't make you better at perspective and positivity. I don't know. I'm wondering.
Sure. So I feel led to start with this. I've met so many beautiful souls that said, "How can I be as impactful, Lisa, as you are when I haven't had your trauma? I haven't had your traumatic background." I go, "Congratulations." Like, number one, you don't get any less of a badge of honor and opportunity. You don't get any less of an opportunity to transform lives because you didn't come from some traumatic past. Like, if I had to pick my past over someone else's past, the only thing that would make me choose mine is because I appreciate the woman I am today. But if you told me I can be this woman and avoid that, I'd pick that slice.
Yep.
I'd pick the slice. So I want to start by saying that you don't you don't need to have a traumatic past to be moving and riveting and powerful in this season. Let me say that. And then the other part to that is, um, you know, I just read something the other day that was posted that said, you have a different relationship to the same story. There was 2 brothers, and they had a extremely alcoholic father, and one brother grew up to be an alcoholic, and the other brother grew up to be an advocate supporting people who have drinking challenges, and he never had a drink in his life. And when you ask them both why did they do it, they both said, because my father was an alcoholic. Right? So it's, how do you use your experience? Do you use your experiences as fuel? I use every single thing. I believe everything is fuel. Everything. Some of your fuel just smell like manure. But if you think, as stinky as manure is, and I got to tell you, I had an 8,000 square foot backyard at one time. And my brother said, and I told my brother, it was all dirt. And I told my brother, I want all grass, 8,000 square feet of grass. My brother says, I need to put manure down to do that, Lisa. I said, fine. Having no idea what 8,000 square feet of manure would smell like. Nick, oh my God. It just smelled like cows had their butts up against my window, like just passing gas in my window daily through all my windows. It was I just had to move out. I was like, I can't do this. I can't. I stink. I feel like I smell like this. But when I turn around and look 4 weeks later, and I saw the beautiful grass that broke through, it was such a great funky lesson for me that even out of your deepest, darkest, most challenging, messiest, stinkiest, funkiest, most shameful experience, if you look for the seed of possibility, lesson, blessing, opportunity, something can grow. So I say, if you've ever failed, fell forward. Don't just fail, fell forward, and fell forward fast. I am who I am because of some of the messiest things in my past. And so I do believe that it's how you choose to relate to your trauma. And have you given yourself permission to have the trauma and heal from the trauma while being brilliant? Most people only choose one or the other. Most people says, I can only have this past, so they can't get past it and they can't give themselves permission to have the worthiness to have an amazing life. I coach them all the time. Or they try to outrun it and act like it never occurred and never want to touch it, never want to deal with it, never want to talk about it because they feel like somehow it discounts their credibility of who they are today. And if you look at me online and you see anything I've done, and if in any way I've earned any form of being impactful or unforgettable, it's because I've learned how to allow them to coexist. My message was born from a mess, and my mess does not prevent my message. And in whatever industry you're in, and if you think about it as a professional, people won't fall in love with your vision until they fall in love with your story.
Yep.
And so the best thing you could do is you can learn how to own your story. Don't learn how to tell your story. Learn how to own your story. It's one of the reasons why I love so much helping people just craft who they are, their story, and learn how to serve it on a platter that's delectable and delicious and and unforgettable, because people are looking for their likeness in you. And their likeness is not going to be in your intellect or where you're going. Their likeness is going to be in something that they felt that was the same kind of feeling you had. Two totally different stories, but the feeling was the same. Feelings are a unifier. Feelings are a unifier. So when you learn how to share that story or be inside that moment that allows me to know I'm not the only one feeling that way, then there's a bond that's created. And so I think that it's how the trauma feeds the calling. And I do believe trauma can feed a calling. And I also believe that people have traumatic situations that don't include lack of money or abuse. I believe some people have traumatic situations coming from very normal households, but their mindset, their belief system, their self-imposed judgment, their fear of speaking up. My husband came from a great household, but he said when we met that he was paralyzingly shy. And that was traumatic for him, that he couldn't speak his heart. We all get to also understand and have compassion for different levels.
It's interesting. And so we started talking too about the way most of us live our life is based on the story we tell ourselves, that way we were raised, which is this is how our family operates, this is how our answer, like all the different things, that the story you are living is just so important. And there are parts of the story that are super important to break out of. One things that reminds me of, is when we're storytelling, as someone who, professionally, like yourself, just in a different way, tells a lot of stories, the first objection people have is that, that no one's going to understand my story, or, I didn't, name whoever the popular person is. I didn't go homeless or hungry or to jail or to whatever it is. And it's so interesting. Whenever we're telling stories, what the most fun part about it for me is finding what the stakes are, because there's stakes in every story. So for instance, I could show you somebody who was born, their parents had a 25,000 square foot house. They had billions of dollars. They had private jets. And their stakes were, what if I'm the idiot that loses all of this? And it's like, oh, I never thought about that pressure because I never had that to lose. But the pressure of 5 generations built this. Are you going to be the idiot to screw it up? I mean,
Right.
that's sort of the head noise they got, and that's stakes. I mean, I would argue those are tougher stakes than having nothing and having to build from scratch, because
Yeah.
one is just a loss. One is, what could I become? So
Yeah.
it's this idea of stakes. And I know people ask you all the time, how do you find a voice that matters to other people? How do you become impactful? All those things. It sounds like, because you do it through writing, speaking, coaching, all of those things. It sounds like, to me, the answer you're giving them, which makes sense to me, is first of all, finding the moments in your life where you found a truth. You found a nugget of truth through adversity, through someone stopping and helping you, somebody giving you a hand up, somebody recognize you, someone to talk to you. Like, let's start to put together a little bit of a roadmap for people who say, I want to have a voice that matters, whether that's a motivational speaker or just in my family or my business, but I don't know where to begin. Where do they begin? In their own story, in the moments that matter, or where?
So I believe it begins with something that I heard. I'll paraphrase it from Dr. Martin Luther King. And like, know what you're willing to stand for. Know what you want your life to say you fought for, you woke up for, you stood for, you grew for, you you killed away your ego for. Like, what does that stand for? Mine stands for the possibility that people can transform, that people can transform, and to understand that transformation is possible for everyone and anyone, and that abundance is our birthright, all of our birthright. Like, I had to get clear
Does that cut
because
so deep
also,
with you, real quick, because you had to transform yourself to get to where you? I mean, so is that a truth that you want to go to the grave, letting everybody else know because you found it for yourself and you know it's possible? Like, how do we
yeah,
find the conviction to know what the
yeah,
thing is?
yeah. So let's go back. I'm a wounded healer. I'm a wounded healer. And so I believe that my belief system that there is no lesson that you are here to bring that you haven't experienced. I believe that your experience qualifies you to have a conversation. So I don't have a lot of conversations about stuff I haven't experienced. And I love that. I love that you open with that. You open with that, Nick. You're like, I haven't experienced these, so I can't speak to you on that. But here's what I believe, and here's what I know. And so I because I experienced it, and I don't believe that the divine, I call him God, call him whatever you choose. I don't believe that God would give us an experience and say, this is just for you and nobody but you. So yeah, when I came through and I climbed over my trauma and I climbed under my limited thinking and I went around or through, you know, then I went, wait, I want to help as many people as possible to do it. So what have you, when you go back to if someone's just starting out, what have you had to do? What have you learned how to do? What have you fought through? What awareness did you have to make? Someone is 10 steps behind you and they haven't had that breakthrough yet. So look at where you are, look at what you're doing. I believe that you're going through something so that you can help someone else's next chapter. I just believe it to be so. I believe it. I didn't talk about making millions until I had made millions. Before then, I talked about turning your life around. I talked about getting up no matter what, because that's all I had done. And then, like, I only start talking about it after I went through it, navigated through. And so I believe that if you are in this season where you're going, what do I do first? What have you navigated through? Well, I haven't done enough to, this is what I hear a lot. I haven't done enough to teach people yet. I haven't done enough to impact people yet. Maybe you haven't done enough to impact people who are 20 steps in front of you, but you've definitely done enough to impact the people who are 30 steps behind you.
Oh, Incredible. And where to begin? This is a funny story. Actually, I just thought about this. So, I decided some years ago that I don't know. I liked to cook. Maybe it's because I like to serve people, and I want to share. I've always enjoyed mealtime. It's like at school lunch, we knew we had like time to hang out and not have to do the school stuff. Lunch has always been my favorite period, still is. But so I got, but I didn't. I had maybe made hamburger helper. I don't know, like some things in college, right? Like I was not a good cook. My mom's a great cook, so I never went hungry. I never was a cook. But I decided I want to get one of these big green eggs. And the big green egg, if you don't know, if you are one of the unwashed masses, the big green egg is a smoker, grill, and an oven, sort of all in one that uses charcoal. And I decided I needed to be a man and I needed to get one because I wanted to learn how to cook. And when you talk about where to begin, that like people would ask me, Nick, you should make some YouTube videos. Or like, I don't know what to tell people. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't have anything to teach people, but I learned my own lesson when I got a big green egg. The very first thing I Googled was, how do I light the big green egg? Like the things that a chef would think, like there's people who've been a 5-star chef for 20 years be like, I can't teach people anything. Like I literally was a beginner. I'm like, how do I light the damn thing? And so there's always somebody who's wanting to know how to light the big green egg. Just understand that. And a big
Yeah.
piece of your authenticity comes from the fact that, and I think it's a great lesson for everybody, there's no reason to talk about things or to think, there's no reason to try to teach things that you have not experienced. No matter how important other people say they are, you just say, that's just not my truth. I can't speak to that. And people will respect you more for it. And the thing that then convicts me a little bit more about your story is when you say, and I call him God too, but again, everyone call him what you want. When God gives you something, it's never only for you. That actually means you also have to address, heal, and be willing to talk about the ugly stuff too, because
Yeah.
everybody's comfortable about talking about the congratulatory stuff, but the ugly stuff is where you will relate to people because they've all felt it too, because there's those moments in life where you felt like nothing, where you literally felt like you were on the bottom of someone's shoe, and sometimes they made you feel that way. I told a story for years about my third grade teacher. Now that I look at it, I have to reprocess. I have to thank her because I'm sure she gave me some drive. But in the middle of class, she said, "You're so stupid," in front of everybody. And it was like I had to reprocess that moment because it I didn't talk about it for years. I didn't even know it was underneath me for all those years, but it was, because those are those moments where you will never forget them. But we have the
Right.
choice to let that person have that power over us. And again, when I think back, I mean, third graders are idiots, first of all. I'm sure I wasn't the quietest child in class or the one who sat still the longest or any of these other things. And I'm sure she sees my mother at the grocery store to this day and asks her how I am. I was always one of her favorites. Like her processing of that time in her life and mine are very different.
Very
But like,
different.
but when you talk about those seminal moments, the ones that when you realize how much they actually hurt you, everybody has those moments. And those are the ones that we can all relate to. Everyone has a moment on the top of the mountain too. Sometimes it's winning a state championship. Sometimes it's getting out of bed after 10 days of losing an important person in your life. So I just encourage everybody here to dig down and find those things that are so core to who you are, and don't be afraid to talk about them, because your people will find you. Your
Yeah.
people will find you. Now every day I get messages on Instagram and Facebook and to join a new community for big green eggers or whatever it is. And I cooked my first picanha steak on a big green egg yesterday. It was so much fun.
Okay. Okay. I
But I
love it.
make pizzas now and I do all the things. But it's we all start somewhere. But think about those points, and I love how you said that, are just, they're authentically you. To you, it was your own transformation, and you realize that wasn't just for you. You were given that
Yeah.
gift so you could help others transform. And I think that's a great place for other people to start too.
Yeah, I truly I love the story, Big Green Egg. I'm totally in my head saying I'm gonna look that up for a Father's Day gift for my husband. It sounds like something he would spend a lot of time trying to figure out. Um, and then I would be I would get the benefit of all the stuff that he.
Win-win.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Um, but yeah, you're so on point with so many things, Nick, in that your journey isn't given to you to keep to yourself. And your story actually doesn't belong to you. It's your story to live, but it's our story to be inspired from. And the distance between you living it and us being inspired is simply you sharing it and recognizing that that someone's looking for the very thing that you haven't told yet, or that you are still deciding, can you? I'm really clear that it will take more for you to hold in the brilliance that's trying to come out of you than it will to just figure out how to let it out. Like, I can only imagine you in third grade, like me in third grade, um, uh, trying to contain a light, or trying to give a light permission to come out. I know that my story doesn't belong to me. And when I was in the airport in Nassau, I walked into a restaurant, and this 6'6" man jumped in the booth. I walk up to the booth to sit down and to eat some chicken soup. I'll never forget this. And all of a sudden, this 6'6" huge man jumps in the booth with all this giddiness, scared the mess out of me. He's like, oh my God, Lisa Nichols. He goes, quitters never win, winners never quit. You came in dead last. And then you start chanting. Your grandmother told you not to lose her. And oh my God, Tonka time. You realize that Tonka time can be rebuilt. And that God, and he went through all my stories. That I sat there like this. And I'm like, yeah. And I was so inspired, not because this man remembered my story. I actually was inspired by the stories. And I can only imagine the people that he told the stories to, how they were inspired as well. And he said, I've shared your story with my staff. I've shared it with my da-da-das. And he goes on and on and on. He talked for like 25 minutes nonstop. And at the end, my bill came, and he said, oh, don't worry about that. I took care of that. I said, oh, I didn't see you take care of it. He goes, oh, they know me. I said, oh, how? He goes, I own this restaurant. Enjoy. And then he gets up. And I've never seen him again in the same restaurant. And it was just a moment when I realized I was so clear. Here, this Caribbean man, born in Nassau, 6'7", 6'8", significantly older than me. He was owning my stories as if they were his. He had the confidence to tell them back to me. And he told about 4 stories. And I realized he was a great example that those stories don't belong to me. They belong to the people who will be inspired by them. And the same is for your stories. You
I
live them
love.
already. I tell people, you've already lived your story. Tell it now,
Oh,
share it.
well, and that's a big key too, by the way. I think that's if you want to share, if you want to be a speaker because you want people to pay you to stand in a spotlight to talk, you're never going to get a speaking gig. The only reason people will listen to you, because we all have that uncle or that aunt at every holiday party. They just sit in the corner and rah, 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 and nobody cares. The only reason you will ever get compensated for your story, it doesn't have to be money, it can be with other things, is because you're not telling your story for your own sake. You're
Mhm.
telling your story for others' sake. And that is the entire secret to all of this, is that your story and your delivery of it is not for you to feel good about yourself. It is to help other people. The moment you stop telling your story for yourself and you start telling it for other people is when it will start to connect. I can assure you of that. And you know that all
Speak,
too well.
speak to inspire, not to impress.
There you go. That sums it up better than I ever could. All right. I know our time is coming to an end, Lisa. I know, how do people find you? I know you've got a cool speaker assessment that I've got, the motivatingthemasses.com/speaking level. You want to tell people a little bit about that assessment they can go do and check out?
Yeah, if you go to motivatingthemasses.com forward slash speaking level, it's a beautiful, beautiful gift of going, how do I impact people? Most people don't know that there's a science to speaking. There's also a soul to speaking. Most speakers who've been speaking for years, with all due respect, are unaware of it. I began to really unpack this. This has been over 15 years of work for me to really understand, how do I help people become unforgettable? I don't want you to be good. I don't even want you to be great. If you have a story, which you do, and people need to be inspired by your story, then be unforgettable. So I took all the years, 27 years in this industry, and I pulled together the consistency, and I came up with the formulas that made you an impactful speaker. What's the formula? What's the methodology? And then what's the methodology that also added the soul of speaking to what you do? And so this is an assessment. It's absolutely free. And I love what it gives you. It gives you the awareness of where your muscles are already developed. And it also gives you the awareness of where your gaps are. And so sometimes I just do gap filling. I just want to go to my gap filling. Like, let me fill the gap, because then what I'm doing well will get stronger. And then sometimes I need to build on what I'm doing well already. Let me see what I'm doing well. Let me own that. And then let me find out where my blind spots are. So this assessment is 13 questions, super, super simple. And then you get a lot of information back. Here's where you are. Here's your strong points. Here are the techniques. There's 16 techniques in the science of speaking. Here are the techniques you should focus on. It doesn't mean you don't focus on the others. I'll probably give you, for the most part, you get maybe 4 or 5. You never get more than 6 techniques. And you may not even get 6, because I don't want you to get paralysis of the analysis. You get so much, you do nothing, right? However, there are all these techniques that are over here, but if you just focus on this, I kid you not, if you focus on the techniques that I tell you, and it's truly your assessment, you'll look up and in 1 to 2 times of you speaking, and not necessarily on stage. You can do it on camera, on social media. You can do it on a podcast. You can do it anywhere that requires a conversation. That simple. You'll feel the growth without anyone else even teaching you anything, just the awareness. So I hope that it's a blessing to you.
Well, thank you for giving that to everybody. And of course, everyone can find you on all the places, all the social media. Just look up Lisa Nichols. You will find her. Lisa, it's always a blessing to spend time with you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I hope we get to hang out in person soon. Can't wait to reveal some of the new projects we're working on together as well.
I know you're like my superpower friend. And thank you for your time. And thank you, Nick, for your authenticity. You are a breath of fresh air to the industry, to the conversation. You're a breath of fresh air of a cross-cultural connection. And I believe all of that matters and all of it's necessary. There are some people that God appointed here to be possibility in medicine. And I think you're both, brother.
Well, I will take it as intended. Thank you so much. And we will catch all of you next time on Questionable. Take care.